Today we're going to talk about how you can recruit and train volunteer leaders in your ministry during COVID. Are you ready? Because it's time.
Holy nuclear time bombs! Holy overeating! Holy roller coasters! It's time! It's time.
It's time for the YM Sidekick Podcast!
Hello, heroes. My name is Tom Pounder, and you are listening to the YM Sidekick Podcast. This is the podcast where ministry leaders come to learn some tips and tricks and how to do ministry more effectively in this very digital and online world. And today I am excited to have Steve Cullum back on the podcast with me. Steve is a friend of mine that we go back with some blogging days, and we both blog for Orange and do some part of the blogging team with Orange, and we have other connections as well. But Steve is a veteran student minister who we were on the podcast before about talking about video games and how he was using that for ministry. And I'll include that link in the show notes so you can refer back to that because it's a great thing that he's doing with video games in ministry. But today we're going to talk about how he is recruiting and training leaders right now during COVID. Because I don't know about you, with me, we're having a hard time doing both of those during COVID. It's been really challenging for us. And so I brought Steve on to talk about that because he's having more success than I am. So we had a really good conversation about that. So without any further ado, let's get into the episode right now, talking to Steve Cullum about how to recruit and train volunteers during COVID. With me right now is my friend Steve Cullum. Steve, how are you?
I'm doing great, Tom. How's it going?
I'm doing good. I see, again, this is just the audio, but I can see you right now because we're doing this on Zoom, and I see you're wearing a Boston Red Sox hat. I forgot you were from that area, right?
Yeah. I spent 10 years doing ministry in the Boston suburbs of Southern New Hampshire, and the first year I moved out there in 2007 when they won the World Series, and it was easy to get hooked on as a fan and stayed on as a fan since moving outside the New England area. Not as close, to the team physically, and also like following them nearly as much as I used to, but yeah, still a fan.
Yeah, that's cool. And you're out in the Colorado area right now. So do you ever get to go see the Rockies play?
Yeah, we went to one game a couple years ago. Due to COVID and everything, of course, we couldn't go last year, but it's exciting. I'm not a Rockies fan at all. In fact, I'm really not a fan of any of the Colorado sports teams, which is great to go from, New England, where I became a fan of pretty much every sport out there that they played, and then moved to the Denver area, and not really a big fan of any of them.
Yeah, well, that is very interesting.
Yeah.
Well, Steve, you and I go back a ways, and I know who you are. You've been on the podcast before, but for anybody who doesn't know who you are and they're listening, you share quickly about who you are and what you do and, kind of where you're from.
Absolutely. Yeah. So as Tom said, I'm in Longmont, Colorado. So that's a suburb basically of Denver. People call it a suburb of Boulder, but we're like almost the same size as Boulder. So it's kind of funny to be referred to as that. It's north of Denver. And I've been the student pastor here, leading middle school and high school for the last 4 years. Before that, I did spend 10 years in a newer church plant in the Boston area. And that was awesome to be able to lead a student ministry kind of from the ground up in a new church plant there. And then came here and completely opposite experience. It's a really, really old church. And I followed a ton of different youth pastors that came before me. And before that, I grew up in Illinois. So I've been did ministry growing up and did college, seminary and everything in Illinois. Then had some experience in New England and then moved here. But kind of just working backwards, I grew up in the church and just fell in love with Jesus at a young age. Had it serving in the church kind of modeled for me by all my family, especially my grandparents. And then when I got into high school, really loved working with the youth group and got some experiences with my youth pastor, both with children's ministry and kids and student ministry and camps and all that stuff. And just, God revealed to me that he wanted me to go on this path of being a professional minister, I guess. And so set me on the path of student ministry, and I've been loving it ever since.
That's great. That is great. So you kind of come back to the Midwest area from how far away are you from Illinois now?
I'm about 2 hours closer.
Okay. Oh,
So
really?
yeah,
Okay.
it went from like 20 hours to like, well, I guess 18 hours to 16 hours. So
Dang, okay.
it's really not that much closer. Yeah. My dad is excited that I'm 2 hours closer, but I was like, Dad, it's still 16 hours. Like it's
Dang,
not that close.
I just thought it just seemed like it was closer, but you're right. You're right. Okay, so that's interesting.
Yeah.
What do you like better, middle school or high school ministry?
Oh man, it all depends. I think both have their pros and cons for sure. I love the energy of middle schoolers. I love just doing goofy stuff with them and how things are like so new. But I love being able to sit down with a high school student, just really talk life and faith and stuff too. So I don't know. I could, depends on the day.
Yeah, I think I'm right there with you. Again, I started off in middle school ministry, although I wanted to do high school ministry. I started off in middle school ministry, and I love just the goofiness of it, and the kids just appreciate you spending time with them. But then the depthness of the high school and what you can do with those high school students is really kind of meaningful and impactful. So.
Yeah.
All right. So let's get into our topic today. We're going to talk about leadership, and we're going to talk about leader recruitment, training, and kind of development type of stuff. Because you and I were talking, and I said, man, my leadership core has taken a hit in the sense of we've lost a lot of leaders over the past 2 years, and it's hard for us to find them and recruit them again, and then really mobilize them. So I want to talk to you with you a little bit about that and what that looks like for you and what you're doing in your ministry. So just give us a kind of a general overview. What has it been like over the past 2 years for you? And then maybe even some things that you were starting to do, and then we'll kind of continue the conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think COVID was just an incredibly difficult thing, and for many, many reasons. Obviously, the health reasons and all that stuff. But I think what we realized is like, how do we actually recruit leaders during this time? How do we continue to pour into them? And they were getting tired and getting kind of burned out, I think, by a lot of what was going on within, like the student ministry world. Like, hey, like, how do we do this online and how's it in person? And I got to think outside the box. And they're doing all this as a volunteer. And so, trying to put all that mental effort into all of that on top of, sticking with it and everything. So we had a lot of leaders that really stuck with it. And it was great, but we did have some that opted out during that time. And then we had some others that jumped on board, which was really exciting. But at the same time, we're like, okay, like, what do we do? How do we're in the middle of trying to figure all these things out. So there were some leaders that I told, just hold on, we'll get you to where you need to be. But just give us some patience right now, because we're kind of trying to figure out how this is going to look moving forward, because, COVID sent us all for a whirlwind. But yeah, I think some of the ways that we've been able to recruit during this time has been really just kind of going back to that ask has been just really big. And it is incredibly difficult when you can't meet in person. Mm-hmm. I think that for churches that are still out there that have either not gone back to in person or are like have been sent back to online only, I feel for you, because I really like I wouldn't say it's impossible, but it's next to impossible to really do recruiting well during those times. And so thankfully we've been back in person for about a year now. And that's been able to kind of given us the opportunity to meet people and stuff. Funny enough that I think, we were talking probably about a year or so, maybe a little over a year ago. And I was talking to you about like, what's it like to be, youth pastor and online campus pastor and everything. And then lo and behold, I kind of found myself in that same role. And I've been kind of overseeing our online campus, our greeters and the chat rooms and all that stuff. And it has sucked me out of the lobby during those times, because I need to be fully invested in overseeing online stuff. Yep. And that made it really, really difficult for me, because I was not meeting any new people that could then invest in our students. So here recently, I've finally been able to start sharing that responsibility with someone else on our staff. And so now I'm able to be back in the lobby and be present and actually meet people that I could recruit. But during that time, it came down to asking our existing leaders, like, who else do you know that we need to get on this team, and trying to put a little more responsibility on them, asking the rest of our staff and stuff like that. And so through that, we've actually, and going back to like previous students that have now graduated as well and stuff. So we actually have added, I think the number was 10. We've added 10 brand new leaders for this year. Just being able to just go about it. Like, we have to do extra work, but it's going after people and being able to give them those opportunities. So yeah, it's been really exciting. And I'll just say, like, we've done our hard work, but I really believe it's just trusting the Holy Spirit in this entire thing, and just saying, hey, God, like, we need people. We know it's difficult. And we need you to show up.
Yeah. Okay. So I heard a lot of stuff here, and this is good stuff here, because I think a lot of us can identify with this, especially the student ministry role. I didn't realize you took on an online component of your job.
Yeah.
But that's more the norm of what I was hearing, is that a lot of student ministers were taking on the role. So, okay. So some things that I heard you say was that you're telling your existing leaders to hold on, just hang on with us a little bit longer. Did you lose anybody? Did some people not hang on?
I think we had like one or two that did not, but most of them did. Yeah. And we've had recently a couple leaders that have been hanging on for a while, that have been doing ministry for years and years and years, and have just recently said, hey Steve, I think it's my time to step off. But that didn't have anything to do with COVID. I think they were able to, they've been holding on to that for a long time. Even before me, there was a lot of turnover, and they were just really holding on for the students. And I think they felt comfortable now stepping out and letting the younger people, that are newer people that we're bringing on, take over. But I think we had like one or two that stepped out during COVID, and we're kind of just, they weren't up for it. But most of them were able to hang on.
Yeah, that's cool. That's great. That's fantastic. Okay, another thing I heard you say is that because you were helping out with the online stuff, you weren't able to be out in the front with people. And as you were sharing that, I'm like, that's my life. Like, I haven't really been able to be out there and meeting new people and greeting new people, because I'm in the back working on the online stuff. And if I ever do come out to the front and talk to a few people here or there, it's only for a few minutes, because I'm like, oh crud, I got to get back. We're starting another service. Yeah. And so that's extremely challenging, extremely hard. And so I think there's a lot of value in you recognizing that and saying that's important. If you're a student minister and you're listening to this right now, if you're not out in the front with people and interacting with people, you're missing good opportunities, I think.
Absolutely. Yeah. And we used to run our student ministry, all of our programming on Sunday morning. And one of the changes we made last year was to move that to Sunday night so that we could have more opportunities. So students could get involved on Sunday morning in worship and serving and all those sort of things, which is great. But then in the process, it took me out because I took on this additional responsibility. I'm like, oh man, well, I've given our students and those volunteers those opportunities, but how am I doing that? So I needed to be proactive and seeking, some way to at least be out there sometimes.
And that's really good. Now, are you still carrying on at this moment the online responsibilities and the student ministry responsibilities?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. I listen, I love the online component, but then there's also that part of the student ministry component that I love too. And so it's a balancing act. I think I am a little bit older than you. But as I think about getting older, that transition becomes more evident. But yeah. Okay. So let's talk about this. Okay. So you've been able to get out and meet with some people, and you've gotten some new leaders. What are you doing for onboarding process now during this time? Like what have you done so far, and what are you looking to do?
Yeah. So actually our executive pastor asked us a couple of weeks ago, well, I guess a couple of months ago now, both our kids ministry and student ministry team, they're like, what are a couple things that you're really prioritizing this next school year? And I told them one thing is our guest experience, making sure that we're having a lot of new students that have started coming during COVID, which is awesome. But what are we doing to really greet them and make sure they're following up and getting them plugged in? And the other side of things really was leadership development and how we're from the ground up, from the recruiting process to onboarding to ongoing training, to really setting up our leaders for success, because we know that there's no way that we're going to be able to reach as many students as we should be able to on our own. I need to multiply myself. I need to use other leaders that we get, that God allows us to invest in, and then send them out to be able to do the work of Christ for these students. And so, yeah, our onboarding process really, it comes down to they have an application, and I've added in, we have usually several conversations with me that usually over coffee or grab lunch or whatever, and just get to know those people if I don't already. A lot of our leaders are coming in because I went after them, or someone that I really trust has went after them and invited them to join, or they're a former student that I've been working with for the last 3 or 4 years. And so a lot of them I know already, or I know the people that have recruited them, and I trust them. And so a lot of that is kind of talking through the ministry, getting to hear their story a little bit more and stuff like that. And then from that point on, we've implemented a couple different training elements. So we're going to start to use Youth Ministry University from DYM this year, and require that all of our existing leaders and any onboarding or any new leaders that come on board will go through the 101 course that they have there, so that we're really all on the same page. And then we'll use that periodically throughout the year for continued training. But anybody that comes on board, they do the application process, the interviews, all that stuff, and then they'll go through 101. And then we have one big training that we do with DYM, again, the National Day of Volunteer Youth Ministry Training that we've hosted at our church the last 3 years. And we pretty much require all of our leaders to go through that training. It's like a half a day, Saturday morning training. And that's our big day of training that we do for all leaders every year. It generates a lot of excitement, and really they have excellent speakers that just they cover a lot of stuff it's so great for them to hear from other voices at that moment. And so that's like our big thing. And then once a month, we've implemented a gathering for our team. So that's really not even training. This is really more along the lines of investment in each other, to gather together once a month on a Wednesday evening. We do our ministry on Sunday nights. So Wednesday evening, once a month, we'll gather together for prayer, celebrating stories, hearing from each other. We'll talk about some aspect of ministry during that time, but the goal for that is to cover whatever can be covered in like an in-person thing. If it's not necessarily information, I will email that to our leaders. That time is really for us to invest in each other and really treat it kind of like a small group kind of environment a little bit. And then we have our weekly programs. So we ask our leaders to be there 30 minutes early for a huddle. We just talk through the night and pray together. So it's a really simple thing, but it's another touch point that we have throughout the year.
That's awesome. Okay, again, you said a lot of great stuff here, so we're going to go back and dig into this. I love the fact that you do this where when you're talking to someone about, they fill out the application, and then you go through a series of conversations and meetings, coffee or lunch. I just know that this is very valuable. From my experience, I know this. There was one time I took a girl, she used to be a former student of mine, and she went to the local university, and I was like, this girl's going to be a great leader. She's going to be fantastic. I can't wait to get her. And so we went to have coffee, and we kind of just went over the job application that we had. And I was like, this is going to be a piece of cake. This is going to be easy. The stuff that she said on that job application, I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't have this girl be a leader. I mean, it's just like, and so I want to encourage people to think that what you do with these conversations is so vitally important, because you think you know somebody, and then you get into these conversations and really work through these things, and it can be completely off the wall stuff.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think we were having a chat with some other leaders a while back, and we were talking through, is there a way to kind of simplify that process or make it as quick as it needs to be? And I think that's a really healthy balance that you have to walk within your ministry, is like, you do want to make it as simple as possible, but don't make it something that you rush through. because this role, especially as a small group leader, you may have some other roles that are easier for a new leader or someone to step in that doesn't require nearly as much. But as a small group leader, that's a big role. And you don't want to just throw anybody in there without actually hearing their story and figuring out what really their heart is and background checks and all that stuff.
Yeah, and you're right. The background checks is important too, because you never know what kind of pops up on them. The other thing I want to hit on is the training with Download Youth Ministry. I know you're really tied in with those guys, and I see your postings about the training. We did our training, just our team this year, for the Download Youth Ministry training. But I love that stuff because here's the deal. I think as a younger student minister, I always just prided myself, and maybe it was a little arrogance to say, I'm going to train my leaders. I'm going to do this. I don't need somebody else's stuff. But what I really discovered over the years is that the content that Download Youth Ministry produces and shares is so good. And that 3-hour training that they do every September, the National Youth Worker Training Day or something. It's such a long word. I always mumble up the word. But that is really important because I love that they give you some lessons, then they give you time to talk about it with your team. The last 2 years we've done that, and it's been such a valuable experience for us and for our team to really kick off our year. Talk to me about your all's experiences.
Yeah, I agree. It's so great to kick off the year with that. And I think very similarly, like you probably have had this experience so many times. I know I have, where, you get a parent that comes to you and says, I don't know why, but you said something that I've been telling my kid for the last 10 years because it came out of your mouth, Tom. They actually heard you and they've started to put it into practice. And I feel like that's the same way with me and our leaders. Like I may say something over and over and over again, but just because Heather Flees says it or Jessica Sanchez says it or Doug Field says it, all of a sudden, it holds more weight and they heard it. And I'm like, man, I've been telling you that for the last 3 years. Why didn't you listen to me? No. But it's so great because they do see them kind of as these really key leaders within the student ministry world. They've been making some huge impacts across the country. And so it's really cool to have those voices speak into our youth ministry. And it's something that I benefit from hearing them all the time. I read their books, I listen to their podcasts, I read their blogs, I go to their conferences, and I grow from all of those people all the time. But it's really cool to be able to bring those people digitally into our room and say, hey, here's some of the experts that I've been growing from. And they have some things to speak into you as a volunteer as well. And it's been so awesome to generate conversations around different things that we can do better, not only as a whole overall ministry, but also them within their individual ministries and their small groups as well.
Yeah, that is really awesome. And it's so true, of what you just said. When you host it, do you host it for other churches to come into your building too? So how is that? I would imagine that's a great opportunity for you to meet some of the other churches too.
It is. Yeah. So I'm also the Colorado director for the National Network of Youth Ministries. So networking just naturally is just in my blood. I love networking. I love connecting with other youth pastors. And in fact, I was talking to my wife yesterday about how I think that was really tough on me. And I didn't realize it until recently how important networking is for me. And I think of all of the other youth pastors as well, to have those other people in our lives that we're rubbing shoulders with and everything. And throughout COVID, the pandemic, early in the pandemic, especially, we just didn't have those connections as much. And that was really tough on me. I didn't realize it at the time, but it made ministry harder because I wasn't connected. And so being able to provide an opportunity for our volunteers to also have those connections has been really cool. Similar to we do a lot of camps and retreats and stuff like that with other churches, with our youth group. This is very similar to that. So we bring other churches in, and usually it's network, our local network churches. So others from around town or near our community. And it's usually 3 or 4, maybe 5 other churches that join us. But it's a really cool experience for them to, like I said, rub shoulders with other youth leaders from other churches and encourage each other. And similar to our students in our youth group, realize that this is a lot bigger than the 4 walls they see every Sunday.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. I think it's a great thing. Whenever, again, we've done it the past 2 years, we've just done it at our church, but it would be great to do that with other churches. Another thing you said is about your Wednesday night gatherings. I like that because we try to do ours. People are busy all the time, and trying to find the right day is never perfect. And so we always would go, let's do it right after church on a Sunday afternoon. We'll do lunch together and we'll cram it in for like an hour and whatnot. But it always feels rushed. It always feels not intentional. But I like how you do it on Wednesday night, and it just dawned on me. It was like a light bulb. Like, duh, that's people go out and do stuff once a month. Anyways, it's once a month. It's on a weekday. It's not like you're taking up their Friday or Saturday night. You're
Mhm.
doing it during the weekday when they probably don't have a ton going on. How has that experience been for your team?
It's been really good. And it's something we just started actually because we've tried those other things. Like you said, I try to do it Sunday after church, or I try to cram it in, like come an extra hour early before youth group or whatever. And it was just always tough to make that happen and to really set aside quality time for it. And so really looking at the calendar this year, we're like, okay, we need to make this a priority. And in order to make that happen, it needs to be on a different day. And we really need to be able, like I need to be able to have it in a place where I don't want to feel rushed,
Mhm.
because I want to put the quality time into that as well. So we decided on once a month because it's once a month.
Yeah.
Like I think everybody can do once a month, and we decided on an hour and a half time. And then yeah, it made sense for Wednesday. I always liked the idea of Wednesday ministry. We just couldn't pull it off. We can't pull it off in our context because a lot of kids have stuff going on throughout the week. But we it just worked out where a lot of our leaders said, yeah, we could do Wednesday, and we're going to try once a month. And so yeah, so far we've only done one this school year, but it was really great to get the whole team together. And on a Wednesday, we could be a little more relaxed. I wasn't rushed from one thing to the next, and we could actually invest in each other.
Yeah, it's almost like if you met with a small group, like a home group type of thing. So that sounds
Yep.
really cool. All right, it was Steve. This has been awesome. Kind of as we wrap up here, what else? How else would you encourage us with leader recruitment or training or development?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that one of the biggest things that I can think of as well, like a lot of people just say that leaders that I've met over the years, like I'm just not a gifted recruiter. That's just not how God wires me. And so, how do I get leaders? And I think one of the biggest encouragements that I believe Doug Fields told me like years and years ago, that said, if that's not your thing, you need to make it your thing for at least one person
Hmm.
and recruit like crazy. Get all the recruiting guts that you have and put it into finding one person, and that one person is going to be that key recruiter for you.
Hmm.
So if you don't feel like you're a gifted recruiter, get a gifted recruiter on your team.
Yeah.
Find someone that can help you with that, and make that one of your top priorities, because we can't do this alone. There's no way. Our capacities are just only so much, and we need each other. We need more people to grow that team of volunteers, and be able to give them an opportunity to invest in the lives of the next generation. And it's huge. And so yeah, if you don't feel like you're a gifted recruiter, find someone else that is, and get them on your team and have them help you. And I think the same thing with training and all that stuff as well. Like, don't feel like you have to do it all. Like, there's a lot of great resources out there, from DYM to Orange to youth specialties to the youth cartel. There's so many great things, leadership stuff all out there. So make sure you're relying on all the resources that are out there, and don't feel like you have to do all the recruiting and training and all that stuff on your own.
Yeah, I agree with both those things. And actually, it made me think of the one thing that you had said earlier about how you were able to recruit some former students of yours to be to help out with that. And that's a gold mine.
Mhm.
If you even if you get two of them, that's two people that stuck around after high school and then that are able to contribute. And so you can be investing in those people as well. And
Absolutely.
so
Yeah,
it.
it's really great for that, because you don't have to explain the ministry to them either. They've been through it. They know that. So then you can kind of just skip past that part of it.
Yeah, no, that's so true. That is very true. So this has been good. Well, Steve, this has been awesome. This has been encouraging and been helpful. You've given me some great insights, and so that's been awesome. If people want to follow up with you, where can they find you? And I know you got a blog and a podcast, so share about that as well.
Yeah, sure. Thanks. Yeah, it's been great to be on again and just chat with you. I love talking with ministry with you anytime I get, Tom. So it's been great. Yeah, that if people want to connect with me, probably the easiest way is my blog. It's stevecullum.com. So that's stevecullum.com. And you'll find links to my social media. My podcast is on there as well. My blog post. Podcast is called the Student Ministry Podcast, and I've been doing it for it'd be 6 years in February, I believe. So it's kind of crazy that it's been that long, but for the most part, I do the same thing as you. I interview other youth workers and chat about ministry and hear what they're going through. And so, yeah, if you want to find that on any of your favorite podcast apps or whatever, we'd love to have you follow it and listen as well. But yeah, stevecullum.com and the Student Ministry Podcast.
That is fantastic. Okay, last question. Throwing you a curveball, but are you looking forward to the next phases of this Marvel Cinematic Universe and everything that's happening there?
That's a great question. That could be an entire episode, Tom.
It could be. I know.
I am. I really am. I'm excited to see where they go next. I feel like they did this whole, Infinity Saga and got that, like the original story that they probably had in mind accomplished. And now they're just having fun and they're playing around with a bunch of different stuff and seeing what sticks. I'm really excited to see the X-Men come into the MCU. Mutants are one of my favorites. In fact, I was a longtime fan of X-Men before I liked the Avengers and all that stuff. Other than Spider-Man, Spider-Man's my favorite, but X-Men, like the entire team of X-Men, are my favorite. So I'm excited for that. I'm not as much of a fan of the Fantastic Four, but I'm excited to see them bring all that into and see how all that works together. So yes, I am.
Yeah. See, I'm not a Fantastic Four fan either. But they're
Marvel's first family. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. So they're really big. So you need to introduce them at some point. It is going to be interesting to see how they introduce all these people that they brought over from 21st Century Fox and all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I would love to see how they're going to get Venom involved in this, because that's an element of Spider-Man that's in there too. So yeah, it's interesting. I love following how they have the shows, they have the movies. It's one big massive craziness.
It really is. Yeah. And I think it's so huge, and the comics have been going on for years and years and years. So there's this huge, database of characters and stories that they can pull from. And I think the big thing is I have to continue to keep my own self in check, because I want them to tell the stories that I'm most familiar with, and the characters that I like the most. But like, there's tons and tons of characters and stories that they can go after. And so I have to remember, hey, Steve, they're not telling the story just for you. Like, you got to be patient and just go where they go. And you've liked everything else, so it'll be okay.
Yeah. It'll be great. What I love that for them to do is bring back Hugh Jackman in some way as Wolverine, because he will always be associated as Wolverine to me. So
he really will. Yeah, he did great.
Well, Steve, again, thanks so much for being on the podcast. I really appreciate it, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right, so there you have it, my conversation with Steve. And again, I know he's an avid comic book guy and Marvel and just comic book guy in general. And so I had to ask him that last question. If you've got questions for him, hit him up on Twitter about Disney or Marvel or comic stuff, Star Wars stuff, whatever you want to hit him up on. He'd love to talk to you. And in fact, I would love to talk to you too about what it looks like for you to recruit and train volunteers during COVID. How much success are you having? What's working for you? What's not working for you? Again, as I said earlier, I'm having a really hard time with it. It's been really challenging for us, but Steve's having a lot greater success, and these are some of the things that he's doing. So I think it's fantastic. So definitely hit me up on Twitter at TA Pounder, or you can even hit up Steve as well at Steve Cullum, and I'll include all his links in the show notes. But we would love to continue this conversation online with you. So definitely hit us up on Twitter and we can carry this conversation on. Or you can even email me at tom@ymsidekick.com. Again, I would love to talk to you a little bit more about that. All right, heroes, well, that wraps it up for this podcast episode. Thanks so much for joining me. As always, if you enjoyed the podcast, go to iTunes or Spotify and subscribe to it, or you can go to ymsidekick.com. There I've got the podcast, I got some vlogs, I got some blogs, I got ebooks, and I got more information about the Digital Bootcamp Facebook group. It's a free Facebook group where you can join in and learn digital tools to help you expand your reach in this very digital and online world. So go to ymsidekick.com for all that content there. All right, heroes, well, I hope you have a great rest of your day, a great rest of your time, and until next time, have a great one.